Now, I don't know if you've seen it, far too few people have. Peter Sellers' greatest and final film being there is the story of Chauncey Gardiner, an idiot who wanders around a walled garden as he has done all of his life, uttering idiot homilies, and some even bigger idiots think it's wisdom, and put him eventually into the White House, where he proceeds to regale the world with the kind of madness that Donald Trump did yesterday in the Oval Office. No one could quite believe their ears, including, it seems to me, though I'm open to persuasion on this, Benjamin Netanyahu, who looked at first like a man who thought he was getting a bike for his birthday, only to discover he was getting a car. And then the longer Trump went on about how America was going to take over the Gaza Strip, the more he realized that this actually may not be the terrific news that it first sounded. We'll be debating that in the course of the evening with you, the audience, and with two outstanding guests. But here's my tuppence worth for what it is worth. I think this is jolly good news for the Palestinian people, for the Palestinian cause. First of all, it is so utterly unhinged, deranged, and doomed that it strengthens the Palestinian case all over the world and weakens Netanyahu. First of all, it simply, literally cannot be done. Not only is it illegal, I realize that these days that's a mere bagatelle, but it is illegal. And there are many governments in the world, European governments and other allied governments, who are not actually allowed to act illegally. As part of international law, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip are illegally occupied territory. This has recently been confirmed by a landmark judgment of the International Court of Justice in The Hague. So, although that kind of thing doesn't matter to the gunslingers, Elon Musk and Donald Trump and the rest, there are governments in the world that have to worry about that kind of thing, because their own citizens can bring legal actions against them in their own country for acting against international law that their country has signed up to. But secondly, how is Donald Trump going to take over Gaza? The might of Netanyahu's army, air force, and navy, armed to the teeth, brim full with 2,000-pound bombs, with missiles, with tanks, with everything that a military has at its disposal, was not able to control a single refugee camp in the Gaza Strip without suffering sufficient casualties, well into 5 figures, that they had to, in the end, agree to a ceasefire and leave. And all of the Gaza Strip is now once again in the hands of the Palestinian people, amongst whom there are, according to Tony Blinken, at least as many fighters, guerrillas, fedayeen, terrorists, you call them what you like, or what your domestic law allows you to call them, at least as many as there were before the Israeli onslaught, the genocidal Holocaust unleashed by Netanyahu, began. So, how, Donald? Are you going to send in the airborne division? Or perhaps the Marines can wade ashore on that pier that you built at a cost of hundreds of millions of dollars? Oh wait, that was washed away after only a few weeks. And what happens when you get ashore, Donald, and the resistance start killing your soldiers the way they killed Netanyahu's soldiers? What are the optics of that, Donald? And then there's the Well, not a small issue. That 2 million Palestinians, although there was an interesting shortfall in the numbers that Donald Trump was adumbrating yesterday, he said 1.7 to 1.8 million. But there was 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza prior to October the 7th. So either that initial figure of 2.3 million was wrong, or Donald Trump's figure of 1.7, 1.8 million is wrong, or Netanyahu killed 500,500,000 Palestinians in 16 months. Time will tell which of those three possibilities, or perhaps permutation of those possibilities, are involved here. But there's the small problem that this beautiful land, this fresh, beautiful land that you're going to give them, is where exactly? Is it in the Galilee? Is it around Nazareth? Is it in the green fields of their own country of Palestine? Where are you going to put 1.8 or 2.3 or 2.1 million people, Donald? Because nobody is going to take them. Hampshire in England isn't going to take millions of Palestinian refugees. New Hampshire in the United States is not going to take millions of Palestinian refugees. Sweden, where there's a mass shooting this evening, the shooter is white, so it won't be terrorism or anything like that. Sweden isn't going to take them. Nowhere is going to take 2 million refugees. Helpfully, you named 2 Arab countries, Jordan and Egypt, where the idea of creating a beautiful land, a garden, is so fanciful. You've obviously never been there. You obviously don't know what Egypt is like, what Jordan is like, topographically, geographically, demographically, economically. You have no idea just how absurd the idea is that either Jordan or Egypt will take millions of Palestinians forcibly deported from their land. Their own public would never accept it. Their own governments would fall if they did so. An incubus of millions of Palestinians forcibly deported from Palestine into their country is merely transferring the war into their own territory, because the Palestinian resistance will not go away, you know. They'll soon be propping up in the garden. And Israel will be bombing the Palestinians. Not now in Gaza, but in Jordan or in Egypt. Are you crazy, Donald? Do you think these countries could possibly accept it? Even if you'd negotiated it with them, instead of publicly outing them as being the place where these deported, ethnically cleansed Palestinian refugees are going to live out their lives in your beautiful garden. Of course, neither country can now even discuss your plan, Donald. It would lead to the overthrow of their regimes, which, may I remind you, are regimes that you have long depended on and paid for, because you need them there in order to preserve the pattern of corrupt kings and puppet presidents that rule virtually all, if not entirely all, of the Arab world today, from the Atlantic to the Gulf. You need them, and you've just put them behind the 8 ball in a way which can only gravely, severely weaken their position. You then went on to publicly out Saudi Arabia as having abandoned its long-held and declared policy that they will never normalize relations with Israel until the establishment of a Palestinian state. A Palestinian state, I remind you, is the state policy of the United States and virtually every single government in the world. So alarmed were the Saudis at what you said about them. At 4 a.m. this morning in Riyadh, and trust me, they're not normally up at that time, whatever their prayer schedule is. At 4 a.m. this morning, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and Prime Minister of the country issued a statement describing your plan as evil, making plain Saudi Arabia has not and will never change its policy on this. So either they're lying or you're lying. Such is your credibility, President Trump. I believe the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. But whether you were telling the truth or he is telling the truth, you just made it impossible for him to climb down from the declared policy of his country. So you have succeeded in uniting the entire Arab and Muslim world against you. You have succeeded in forcing the German government, the French government, most governments who've spoken in the European Union to denounce your plan as flatly illegal. Even Anna Baerbock has told you how bonkers your idea is. In fact, the only miserable, shrunken, vicious little satrapy that has not denounced your idiot ideas is the one I'm sitting in right now, Great Britain and Northern Ireland. That's the only European country which has not denounced your plan. So you've united the whole world against you. Mind you, it could have been the run-up that helped achieve that. President Trump, every 72 hours of your presidency, you have announced your intention to take over another country's territory. You threatened to take over Canada. You threatened to take over Mexico. You threatened to take over Greenland. You threatened to take over Panama, and now you are threatening to take over Palestine. Is this what you meant by putting America first? Is this what America first means? An unhinged bull in a china shop, careering around, knocking everything over, and breaking all of your previous relationships? If so, it's cool, it's fine by me. Because it's why I love you, actually. Because you say the quiet part out loud. Not for you, the lying, two-faced, fork-tongued arts of diplomacy achieved through USAID, achieved through surreptitious regime change, through covert actions, through three-letter agencies. No, you are open and honest, like a thug in The Sopranos, eating your curds and whey at the table outside with your lurid, florid shirt on. That's you, Donald Trump. You are the true face of the American empire. You are the real American empire. The ugly American. That's you. And so everyone can see it now. And the question is, and it's a question their public will be asking, what are we going to do about this? We now have this gruesome twosome, Netanyahu and Trump, thinking they can bludgeon and blast their way through every international crisis and problem, irrespective of who gets cut down in the crossfire. What are we all, the rest of us, the rest of the world, the 97% of the world that are not America, what are we going to do about it? Now, breaking news, even more bizarrely, Trump says he hasn't committed to troops in Gaza. So how are you going to take over without any troops? Whose troops are you going to use? And what method of transportation did you have in mind for the Palestinians you're going to forcibly deport, never to allow them to return? All of these are your words, not mine. Were you thinking cattle trucks? Like the cattle trucks that transported the Jews and others all over Europe during the last Holocaust? Or ships like the Africans that you had taken across the Middle Passage in chains to be disgorged on somebody else's territory? Are you going to force march them? In which case, to where? Into the Sinai desert? That's a desert, by the way, Donald, not the plural of sinus. There's so much to be unpicked in this one press conference, just one. It leaves me time only to mention what I alone seem to have noticed as the most sinister of gifts. Netanyahu presented Donald Trump with a gold-plated pager and a regular pager, like the pagers that blew the limbs and the faces of thousands of people in Lebanon in the most widespread act of international terrorism seen in recent decades. This was a warning to you, Donald. Couldn't you see it? This was him warning you that if you were to step out of line, if you were in any way to let him down, everything could end up exploding in your face. Colonel Douglas McGregor, up next. You don't want to miss him. I'm certain of that. Stay tuned.